The ship moved slowly through the unknown system, its engines quiet as it glided across the black sea of space. It was a small survey vessel, designed not for battle but for searching and learning. Inside, a crew of 6 humans worked with steady focus, their eyes fixed on the screens that displayed readings from the planet below. The planet itself looked lifeless at first sight. It was covered with endless deserts, its surface dry and cracked under a faded sun. No oceans sparkled, no forests waved in the wind. From orbit, it seemed like a world forgotten by time. The crew almost passed it by, but then a sharp signal appeared on their instruments. It was faint but clear, a pulse of energy coming from beneath the sands. Myra, the ship's scanner operator, frowned at her console. "This is not natural," she said softly. "The reading is too structured. Something is built down there." The captain, a calm man named Ryan, leaned forward in his chair. "Could it be a crashed ship?" Myra shook her head. "No. The signal is too steady. This is old, very old, but still alive." The crew exchanged looks. Human explorers had traveled far, meeting alien ruins and long-dead civilizations before, but each discovery carried mystery and danger. Yet something about the signal felt different. It was not just the strength but the silence around it. It had slept under the sands for ages, waiting. Ryan made the decision quickly. "Prepare the lander. We are going down." The descent was rough. Storms of dust rose from the planet's surface, sweeping across the lander's windows. The sky was a dull orange, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. The ground stretched out flat and endless, a sea of sand and stone with no sign of life. Yet the instruments led them to a point where the desert seemed slightly disturbed, as if the earth itself hid a secret. The lander touched down with a soft thud. The crew stepped outside, their suits protecting them from the thin air. The silence was deep, so deep that even their footsteps seemed heavy. They carried scanners, which pointed them toward a slope where the sand dipped into a shallow valley. At first it looked like nothing more than a natural depression, but then Myra stopped and raised her hand. "Look." Half buried beneath the sand was a line of stone. It stretched in a perfect curve, too straight, too deliberate to be natural. The crew began brushing away the dust, and slowly the shape revealed itself. It was an arch, tall and wide, carved from dark stone that had not eroded with time. Strange symbols covered its surface, worn yet still clear. "It is a doorway," whispered Terran, the engineer. The crew stood in silence, their breath shallow inside their helmets. The arch seemed to watch them, as if waiting for them to decide. Ryan placed his gloved hand on the stone. It was cold, far colder than the desert around it, as if it belonged to another world. The scanners confirmed what they already guessed. Below them stretched a massive structure, buried deep in the ground. Long corridors and chambers spread out like the bones of a sleeping giant. The scale was overwhelming. Whatever had built this place had meant for it to last forever. "We have found something more than ruins," Ryan said. "This is a tomb, or a fortress, maybe even a palace. But it is not dead. Look at the readings. Something inside is still working." The thought made the air grow heavier. The crew worked together, clearing enough sand to reveal a passage leading downward. A narrow stair carved from the same dark stone descended into the earth. The first step was covered with dust, yet the edges were sharp, untouched by time. They set up lights and moved carefully. The stairs went deep, spiraling into darkness. The walls were carved with the same strange markings seen on the arch, patterns that seemed to flow like rivers of meaning but carried no language they could read. Their lights flickered against the stone, and shadows stretched across the steps like silent guardians. At the bottom, the passage opened into a vast chamber. The crew stood in awe. Pillars rose like towers, each carved with figures of beings that looked almost human but not quite. Their eyes were deep and hollow, their hands raised in gestures that might have been blessing or warning. The air was dry but strangely clean, as if the chamber had been sealed from time itself. In the center of the chamber stood a sealed gate. It was massive, built from stone and metal fused together in a way no human technology could mimic. Symbols covered its surface, and in the middle was a circle that glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. No one spoke at first. The gate seemed alive. It was not open, yet it was not entirely closed. The glow suggested that something beyond still stirred, waiting for the right hand to touch it. Myra broke the silence. This is the source of the signal. Whatever lies behind this gate is still active. Terran took a step closer, scanning the surface. This construction is beyond anything we know. The power inside this place has lasted for longer than human history. Ryan raised his hand, stopping him. Do not touch it yet. This is no ordinary ruin. We need to understand before we open anything. The crew spread out, searching the chamber. They found carvings that showed lines of figures kneeling before tall shapes that wore crowns. The images told of kings, or rulers, who commanded respect across worlds. But no words explained their names or their fate. Every step echoed against the stone, and every echo sounded like a whisper from the past. The explorers felt as though they were trespassers in a place meant for greater beings. Yet at the same time, they felt drawn forward, unable to turn back. After hours of study, they returned to stand before the gate once more. The faint circle of light pulsed steadily, as if breathing. Ryan spoke quietly, his voice steady but thoughtful. This world was silent for millions of years, yet it holds a secret of kings. Whatever they built here, they meant it to endure. And now we stand before it? The crew looked at each other, their eyes filled with both fear and wonder. They had come to map stars and measure dust, but instead they had found a resting place of legends. The silence of the desert above was nothing compared to the silence of this chamber, where time itself seemed to bow. None of them said the words aloud, but all felt the same truth. This was no ordinary discovery. This was the beginning of something far greater. And deep behind the sealed gate, something waited. The chamber was vast and silent, but the crew knew this was only the beginning. The sealed gate loomed before them, its strange glow pulsing like the heartbeat of a giant sleeping behind walls of stone and metal. The crew stood quietly, as if the very air warned them to speak softly. Ryan, the captain, took a slow breath. We mark this as our first point, he said. No one touches the gate until we understand it better. We do this carefully. The others nodded. They trusted his steady voice, though each one of them felt the same pull toward the glowing circle on the gate. It was not just curiosity. It was something stronger, something that felt like an invitation. Myra, who had been scanning the chamber walls, called out. There are more passages. The readings show tunnels leading out from this hall. They may connect to other parts of the structure. Ryan turned to the group. Good. We will map everything first. If this is a tomb, or a palace, then the builders left more behind than one sealed door. The team moved in pairs, their lamps cutting across the ancient stone. The walls were smooth, too perfect to be made by hand. Some passages sloped downward, others stretched straight into darkness. Along the walls, carvings continued, showing shapes of tall figures with crowns upon their heads. At their feet were crowds of smaller forms, bent low in gestures of obedience. Terran, the engineer, traced the edge of one carving with his gloved finger. Whoever they were, they wanted to be remembered as rulers. Not just of this world, but of many. Myra's eyes followed the carvings. Do you notice? The figures kneeling are not all the same. Different faces, different shapes. It is like many species were gathered under one rule. The idea filled the group with silence. To unite many worlds was not simple, not even with advanced ships and power. What kind of kings had once sat here, whose memory was carved into stone that lasted forever? They followed one tunnel until it ended in another chamber, smaller but still majestic. In the center stood a broken pedestal. On its surface lay fragments of something metallic, perhaps once a crown or a weapon, now shattered. Around the pedestal were more carvings, but these looked different. The kings were shown not in power but in battle, their figures standing tall against shadows that twisted and reached with claws. "This is not only a tomb," whispered Lian, the youngest of the crew. "It is a story." They fought something. No one answered. The carvings spoke for themselves. The kings had not only ruled, they had also protected. They moved on. Each passage revealed something new. One led to a long hall lined with statues, each carved with exquisite detail. The statues did not all look alike. Some were tall with elongated limbs, others broad with thick arms, others slim with almost human shapes. But every statue wore the same crown, a symbol of shared kingship. The hall ended at another sealed gate, smaller than the first. This one had no glow, no pulse of hidden energy. It was cold and silent, a door that had truly died with time. "This place is a network," said Ryan. "Gates, halls, chambers, each with purpose. But the main one, the one still alive, is at the center." They returned at last to the great gate, the heart of the structure. The glow remained, steady and calm. The gate seemed patient, as if it had waited centuries and could wait more. Myra crouched beside it, scanning carefully. "The energy is unlike anything I have seen. It does not come from fuel or heat. It feels more like resonance, as if the stone itself remembers power." Terran stepped closer, curiosity burning in his eyes. "It could be a lock. A key may be needed. Something to match the signal." Ryan shook his head. "Not yet. We risk nothing by watching longer. We risk everything by rushing forward." They set up camp in the main chamber, their equipment arranged in a circle of light. Outside their lamps, shadows stretched tall across the stone walls, making the statues look alive. The crew worked in silence, their thoughts heavy. Every member felt the same question rise inside: what lay beyond the sealed gate? As hours passed, they studied more of the carvings. On one wall, they found an image unlike the others. It showed rows of rulers seated on thrones, their crowns shining, but one throne at the center was empty. The space was carved with care, as if the absence itself carried meaning. Lian pointed at it. "Why would they carve an empty seat?" Myra tilted her head. "Perhaps it was waiting. Perhaps there was a king who never came." Ryan's gaze lingered on the empty throne. The thought unsettled him. Or perhaps it was left for the one who would arrive later. The chamber seemed colder after his words. The gate's glow reflected off their helmets, steady, unchanging. It was impossible to tell whether the structure welcomed them or warned them. Night came, though time had little meaning inside the tomb. The crew rested in turns, their lamps dimmed but never fully dark. The silence of the chamber was absolute. No wind, no dripping water, no shifting stone. Only the faint hum of the glowing circle. It seemed almost like breathing, soft and endless. During his watch, Terran stood before the gate alone. His hand hovered close to the surface. He did not touch it, but the air felt charged, alive. For a moment, he thought he heard something, a faint echo not from the chamber but from beyond the gate. It was like the memory of voices long gone. He stepped back quickly, his chest tight. When Ryan returned to relieve him, Terran only said, "The gate is not silent. It listens." By the next cycle, the crew was restless. They had seen carvings, statues, empty thrones, but no answers. The gate remained, unyielding. Finally, Ryan spoke what they all felt. "We did not come across the stars to stop here. Whatever lies behind this gate is the truth of this place. We cannot turn back now." The others agreed with solemn faces. They had uncovered the hidden structure, traced the tunnels, and mapped the halls, but the heart of the secret waited beyond the sealed stone. Whether it was danger or wisdom, they would face it together. Myra adjusted her scanner. Then we prepare to open it. The crew gathered their tools, careful and steady. Their lights glowed against the ancient surface. The circle of energy pulsed brighter, as if it had heard their decision. The air grew heavy, carrying the sense that the builders of this place had known such a moment would come. They stood together, 6 humans before the eternal gate of kings, knowing that when it opened, nothing would be the same. The gate opened with a slow and deep sound, like stone grinding against time itself. The circle of light that had pulsed for so long grew brighter until the whole doorway shone. Then, without warning, the surface split apart in sections, sliding back into the walls. Dust rose, but no storm followed. The passage beyond stood clear, as if it had been waiting for ages to be revealed. The crew stood in silence. No one moved at first. Each of them felt the weight of the moment, the sense that stepping forward would carry them far beyond a simple discovery. Ryan, their captain, took the first step. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Stay close. We go together." Their lights pierced the darkness inside, though it was not as empty as they feared. Small crystals embedded in the walls gave off a faint glow, enough to outline the passage. The walls were smoother here, almost polished. The air felt cooler and cleaner, as though this place had never been touched by the desert above. The passage stretched long, sloping slightly downward. Carvings filled both walls, more detailed than before. They showed scenes of rulers seated on thrones, their crowns shining, while crowds of beings stood below them. Some bowed, others raised weapons in salute, and others carried banners. The crew studied them as they walked, their boots echoing softly. They ruled not just with power, Myra said quietly, tracing the outline of one carving with her light. They ruled with loyalty. Look at the faces of the people carved here. They do not look like slaves. They look proud. Taryn nodded. This was no small kingdom. It was an empire, held together by something more than fear. The crew continued forward until the passage widened. They stepped into a chamber so vast that their lights barely touched its farthest walls. Slowly, as they spread out, their beams revealed rows of statues standing tall. Each statue was carved with great care, larger than life, their crowns rising high above their heads. There were dozens of them, standing side by side, forming 2 long lines that led deeper into the chamber. Each figure was different. One had long arms and narrow shoulders, another broad chest and heavy features, another a slim form with tall, graceful curves. Yet all wore crowns of similar design, marking them as rulers. The crew moved between them with hushed breaths. The statues seemed almost alive, their stone eyes watching the intruders. Some carried scepters, others swords, others empty hands lifted in gestures of command. The detail was so sharp that even the folds of robes looked soft. It was as if the kings themselves had turned to stone and stood here forever. At the far end of the hall, a raised platform waited. Upon it stood a single throne, tall and grand, carved from both stone and shining metal. It was larger than any human chair, built for a figure of great size. The arms of the throne were engraved with endless lines of symbols, and its back stretched high like a tower. But what drew their eyes most was not the throne itself. It was the space around it. On either side of the central throne stood smaller thrones, also carved in stone. Some were cracked, some broken, but each held a crown resting upon its seat. Dust had gathered over the ages, but the crowns remained, faint light glimmering from them. Each one was different, shaped to match the statue of its king. Yet in the center, the largest throne stood empty. No crown rested there. The silence grew heavy. The crew could hear their own breathing, steady but strained. Leanne, the youngest, whispered, "This is the Hall of Kings." The name felt right. The statues, the thrones, the crowns. This was not a simple chamber. This was a memorial built to honor rulers who had once held power across countless stars. Myra's gaze lingered on the empty central throne. Why is it empty? If this is their resting place, then where is the crown of the greatest king? No one answered at once. The idea itself was unsettling. Every other throne carried a crown, but the central seat, the one meant for the highest ruler, had been left bare. Taran walked closer to the main throne, his scanner humming softly. The material is strange, he said. It carries energy, the same resonance we saw in the gate. This throne is not just a seat. It is something more. The others gathered around. The carvings at the base of the throne showed scenes of unity. Species of all shapes stood together, lifting banners under the watchful gaze of a crowned figure. Ships soared across stars, and worlds bowed to the same leader. Yet the final carving showed something unfinished, a figure rising, but its head empty, no crown upon it. Ryan studied the image. This throne was left for someone yet to come. It was never meant to be filled by the kings who ruled before. The thought settled into the minds of the crew. This hall was not only a tomb of rulers. It was a prophecy. A message across time. They explored the sides of the chamber, moving carefully between statues and thrones. Some pedestals carried offerings, small metal objects that looked like gifts or treasures. Others held stone tablets carved with symbols none could read. The air smelled faintly of dust, but there was no decay, no sign of death. The place felt eternal, untouched by the passage of ages. As they moved, their lights flickered across the faces of the kings. Though each was carved from stone, the expressions carried strength and wisdom. Some looked stern, others kind, others sorrowful, but all radiated a sense of greatness. Lian stopped before one statue and stared. Do you see? The crown is broken. The others joined him. Indeed, the statue's crown had been carved in two, a jagged crack running through it. The stone beneath was scorched, as if fire had once touched it. What happened here? Myra whispered. Ryan's voice was steady, though his heart raced. A war, perhaps. A battle that even kings could not escape. These crowns are not just symbols. They carry meaning, maybe even power. The crew fell silent again. The hall seemed to breathe with memory, each statue watching them with quiet judgment. They felt small, standing among giants of history. At last, they returned to the central throne. Its empty seat seemed to pull them closer, as though waiting. The faint hum they had felt at the gate echoed here, hidden deep within the stone. It was as if the throne itself was alive, waiting for a hand to touch it. But none of them moved. Not yet. They were explorers, not rulers. And though the empty throne called to them, its weight was clear. To sit upon it would not simply be discovery. It would be destiny. Ryan turned to the others, his voice low. This hall is not a grave. It is a message. The kings left this for the future. And now, it seems, that future has arrived. The glow of their lamps reflected on the empty throne. The silence of the Hall of Kings wrapped around them like a shroud, carrying the unspoken truth. Humanity had stepped into a place where kings once ruled, and the question remained, who would rise to claim the seat they had left behind? The crew remained in the Hall of Kings for hours, their lamps casting circles of light that stretched and faded into the endless shadows. The empty throne stood before them, silent but powerful, as if it carried the weight of the entire chamber. Each member of the crew felt the same pull, the sense that they were no longer simple explorers. They were witnesses to something meant to last forever. Myra kept studying the carvings around the throne. Her scanner showed faint traces of energy running beneath the stone floor, hidden lines of power that converged at the base of the central seat. This place is not just stone, she whispered. There is something living beneath it. Not alive like us, but alive in memory. Something is still awake here. Terran, ever the engineer, bent down and brushed dust away from a panel carved into the ground. Symbols covered its surface, arranged in rings. He ran his scanner over it and frowned. These are not simple carvings. They are circuits, etched into the floor itself. This entire hall is a machine. The words made the air feel heavier. If the hall was a machine, then it was not silent at all. It was only waiting. Ryan stepped forward and looked at the throne. Whatever it is, it was built for a reason. If the kings ruled so many worlds, they wanted their story remembered. They left a message here, and I think it is meant to be seen. No one argued. They all felt the same truth. The statues, the crowns, the carvings, they were more than art. They were the foundation of something greater, and the throne was its key. Slowly, Ryan placed his hand on the arm of the throne. The surface was cold at first, then warm, as though the stone recognized his touch. The air vibrated softly, and the faint hum that had followed them since the gate grew louder. The crowns on the smaller thrones shimmered faintly, their metal catching light that was not from the crew's lamps. Myra gasped as the chamber itself began to change. Symbols carved into the walls lit up, glowing with pale light. The statues cast long shadows that shifted across the floor. And in the air above the central throne, lines of light formed, weaving together into a great projection. At first, it was only shapes and movement, but slowly, figures emerged. Tall beings, each wearing a crown, appeared in shimmering light. Their faces were noble, their postures proud. They stood in a circle, looking outward, their hands lifted as though addressing an unseen crowd. The crew stood frozen. The vision was not soundless. Low tones echoed through the chamber, deep voices speaking in a language none of the humans could understand. The words rolled like thunder, powerful and commanding, but no translator could break them apart. Even without understanding, the meaning carried through. The gestures of the rulers, the sorrow in their eyes, the weight in their movements, it was clear. This was a farewell. The figures raised their hands, and images formed around them. Ships moved across stars, armies marched in unity, and crowds of countless species bowed in respect. Then the vision shifted, showing darkness. Shadows spread across worlds, monstrous forms without clear shape. The kings fought them, their crowns glowing with light that drove the shadows back. But the war carried cost. One by one, the rulers fell, their crowns burning before dimming to silence. The last part of the vision was the most haunting. The circle of rulers gathered in the hall itself, just as the humans stood now. They placed their crowns upon the thrones, their heads bowed. Then they turned to the central throne, leaving it bare. The tallest of them raised his hand toward the stars, as if pointing to someone unseen, someone yet to come. The vision faded, leaving only the empty throne glowing faintly. The crew stood in stunned silence. They could not speak for several moments. It was Myra who finally broke the stillness. They left this for the future. This is their message. Leanne's young voice trembled. But what does it mean? Why show us battles we cannot understand? Why leave the throne empty? Ryan looked at the throne, his expression grim but steady. Because they knew they would fall. They built this place as their resting ground, but they also built it as a warning. Their fight ended, but they believed another would rise to continue what they began. Terran nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the glowing stone. The empty throne is not a loss. It is a promise. It was never meant to be filled by them. It was left for someone who would come after. The weight of his words settled heavily on the group. For centuries, perhaps for millennia, this place had waited. And now, by chance or by fate, humans had arrived. The chamber grew quiet again, the glow of the throne dimming but not disappearing. The vision was gone, yet its presence lingered. The air still carried the echo of voices, as if the rulers themselves were watching. Myra spoke softly. Do you realize what this means? Humanity was not just the first to open the gate. Humanity may be the ones this place was waiting for. Ryan's voice was calm but thoughtful. Or perhaps not only us. Perhaps the kings left their message for whoever had the courage to step forward. It may be that the empty throne does not care about species, only about will. The others listened, their hearts beating faster. The thought was frightening and yet filled with wonder. To stand where ancient kings had stood, to see their final farewell, was more than exploration. It was destiny pressing upon their shoulders. The crew set up their equipment again, recording every detail. They scanned the carvings, the crowns, the glowing lines in the stone. But no tool could capture the true weight of the vision. That was something only eyes and hearts could carry. As they worked, Lian kept glancing at the throne. He whispered to Myra, "Do you think anyone will ever sit there?" Myra did not answer at first. Her gaze was fixed on the empty seat, its surface glowing faintly as if alive. At last, she said, "Yes. But whoever it is, it will not be an explorer. It will be someone ready to carry all the weight of the kings before them." The chamber grew colder as their lamps dimmed with the passing hours. The statues stood silent, their stone faces unreadable. The crowns upon the thrones shimmered faintly, as if they remembered the vision too. Ryan gathered the crew together. "We have seen their message. We know what they left behind. But we must be careful. This place may not just be a memory. There could be more here, waiting. We will rest, then continue deeper." The crew agreed, though none truly rested. Each time they closed their eyes, they saw the vision again: the kings rising, the shadows spreading, the crowns burning out, and finally, the empty throne waiting. The silent message was clear. The rulers had spoken across the gulf of time. Their fight was over, but their legacy remained. And now, humanity stood in their hall, holding the future in their hands. The vision of the kings lingered in the minds of the crew long after the glowing figures had faded. The hall was silent again, yet the silence now carried weight. It was no longer the quiet of a forgotten tomb but the silence of expectation, as though the air itself waited for a choice to be made. The crew gathered near the central throne. Their lights flickered softly, throwing long shadows across the statues that stood like eternal guardians. Each member of the team stared at the empty throne, the bare seat that seemed to radiate unseen power. Lian was the first to speak. "If the kings left this place for someone to come after them, then maybe that someone is us." His words made the others shift uneasily. No one wanted to say it out loud, but all of them had felt the same thought pressing at the back of their minds. The throne had responded to Ryan's touch, lighting up the chamber, awakening the message of the kings. None of their scanners or machines had been able to explain it, yet the stone had recognized him. Myra shook her head slowly. "We cannot know that. The kings may have left the throne for anyone strong enough to reach it. We only happened to find it first." "But the throne reacted," Lian insisted. "It did not open for the statues, or for the crowns. It woke when Ryan touched it." Ryan raised a hand to silence them. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed the same unease they all felt. "It is too early to decide. We cannot assume this was meant for us. We must think carefully. This hall is more than a room. It is a test. Perhaps it only responds to life. Perhaps it only responds to will." The debate hung heavy in the air. No one wanted to claim destiny, yet no one could ignore the signs. The ancient kings had bowed before the empty seat, had left their crowns behind, and had carved their story in stone so that someone might find it. Now, by chance or fate, humans had. Terran, the engineer, stepped closer to the throne. His scanner flickered with readings he could not understand. "The energy in the seat is not just memory. It feels alive. It is almost like the throne is searching for something. For what? Myra asked. Terran shook his head. A match. A presence. Something that completes it? Ryan's gaze fell on the throne again. The surface seemed ordinary, stone and metal fused together, yet he could feel its pull. It was not loud or forceful. It was quiet, patient, as though it already knew the answer. The crew decided to test. One by one, they stepped forward and touched the throne. First was Myra. She placed her hand on the armrest. The surface remained cold. The faint hum in the air did not change. She stepped back, her face thoughtful but calm. Next was Terran. He pressed his palm firmly against the stone. For a moment, the hum seemed to flicker, but then it fell silent again. He let out a frustrated breath. It knows I am not the one. Then came Lian. His young eyes were bright with hope as he placed both hands on the seat. For a heartbeat, the glow beneath the throne pulsed faintly, but it faded as quickly as it came. He lowered his hands, disappointment heavy on his face. The others tried too, but the result was the same. The throne remained quiet, waiting. Finally, Ryan stepped forward once more. He did not rush. He moved with the same calm that had guided them since the beginning. As his hand touched the throne, the hum returned. It grew stronger, filling the hall with a low resonance that vibrated in their chests. The carvings on the floor lit up again, and the crowns on the smaller thrones shimmered faintly. The others watched in silence. There was no denying it now. The throne responded to him, and only him. Lian whispered, "It is you." Ryan did not answer at once. His eyes stayed fixed on the empty seat, the faint glow beneath it, the feeling of power that seemed to reach through the stone into his hand. At last, he spoke. "It responds, yes. But that does not mean it is mine. It could mean something else entirely. Perhaps it only recognizes us as human. Perhaps it is not me, but our kind." Myra nodded slowly. "That may be true. But even so, it answers only to humanity. That is the question we must face. Why us?" The silence grew heavy again. The statues loomed over them, the crowns glimmered faintly, and the empty throne seemed almost to listen. Terran broke the silence. The kings ruled many species. They united worlds. Why would they leave their legacy to one species alone? Unless they believed that one species could carry the burden after them. Lian's voice trembled. "And maybe that species is ours." The words filled the chamber like a spark. None of them wanted to accept it fully, but none of them could deny it. Humanity was young compared to the civilizations that had ruled before. Yet here, in the heart of the Hall of Kings, it was humanity the throne recognized. Ryan turned to his crew. His expression was calm, but his voice carried weight. "This is the human question. Why us? Are we chosen? Or are we simply the first to arrive?" No one answered. The question hung in the air, as heavy as the silence of the chamber. The crew began studying the carvings again, searching for any clue. They found images of kings holding their crowns high, light shining from them like beacons. They found carvings of ships spreading across stars, carrying banners of unity. But none of the images explained the empty throne, or why it would answer to a human hand. Hours passed. The chamber remained the same, silent except for the faint hum when Ryan touched the throne. The others debated quietly, but no agreement came. At last, Ryan spoke again. "We cannot answer the question here. Not now. But we know this: humanity has been noticed. The kings left this place not as an end, but as a beginning. They are watching to see if we will rise, or if we will fall as they did." The others listened, their faces thoughtful, their hearts heavy. It was not just about discovery anymore. It was about destiny. The empty throne was not simply a relic of the past. It was a test for the future. The humans packed their equipment slowly. None wanted to leave the hall, yet all knew they could not stay forever. As they prepared to move deeper into the structure, Myra cast one last glance at the empty seat. Her voice was soft but filled with conviction. The kings left the throne for someone who would come after them. If it is humanity, then we must prove worthy. The crew followed Ryan into the next passage, their lights cutting into the darkness. Behind them, the Hall of Kings stood silent once more, its statues watching, its crowns glimmering faintly, and its throne waiting for the answer to the question it had asked, why humanity? The passages beyond the Hall of Kings were narrow and dim. The walls carried faint patterns, almost like veins of light that pulsed slowly, as if the stone itself was alive. The crew moved carefully, their lamps throwing beams ahead of them, while the silence pressed close from all sides. Each step carried the weight of what they had left behind. The throne, the statues, the question of humanity's place, it lingered in their minds like an echo that refused to fade. Every member of the team felt it, though none spoke at first. Finally, Myra broke the silence. We should accept the truth. The throne answers to us. That means the kings trusted our kind, or at least believed in us. If they fell, then their burden now rests on humanity. Taryn gave a heavy sigh. Burden is the right word. You saw those carvings. They ruled over many worlds. They carried peace and unity. And then they collapsed. If we are to continue their path, we will inherit not only their strength but their weakness too. Lian, walking at the rear, tightened his grip on his scanner. But maybe we can do better. Maybe we can learn from their mistakes. Humanity has always risen after struggles. This could be our chance to prove we can carry what others could not. Ryan led the way, his lamp steady. He listened to their words without speaking, his eyes fixed on the glowing path ahead. He understood what they all felt: pride, fear, and uncertainty. The throne had not given them an answer. It had only offered recognition. What they did with that recognition was up to them. The passage opened into another chamber. This one was round, its walls covered with carvings that spiraled upward like the rings of a tree. At the center stood a tall pillar, and on it rested a stone tablet. The crew gathered around it quickly, eager for any clue. The tablet was covered in ancient script, but again the same strange effect occurred. The moment they looked at it, their minds seemed to shape the meaning. The message was not in words but in ideas, carried directly to them. The script told of the king's legacy. It spoke of how they had built order from chaos, how they had united countless species under one banner. It spoke of their laws, their wisdom, and their strength. But it also spoke of pride. They had believed themselves unshakable, and in that pride, they had ignored the cracks forming beneath their rule. The message was not long, but it was clear. The kings had left their throne not as a gift but as a challenge. Whoever came after them would inherit not only their glory but also their mistakes. Myra's voice was quiet as she finished reading. The throne is not a reward. It is a weight. Ryan nodded. And the kings knew that. They did not hide their failure. They left it as a warning. If we claim their seat, we must also claim their burden. The chamber grew heavy with silence again. Each of them pictured what it would mean for humanity to rise into such a place. To rule not just their own people, but to carry the hopes of many worlds. To risk falling as the kings had fallen. Taryn broke the silence with a practical thought. Even if humanity wanted this, we are far from ready. We have only begun to reach the stars. We are scattered, divided, and uncertain. How can we carry the weight of kings when we can hardly carry our own unity? Lian countered quickly. But we are growing. Every year our reach spreads. We learn faster than most. Maybe the throne does not ask if we are ready now. Maybe it asks if we are willing to rise to the challenge. His words filled the chamber with a spark of hope. The others looked at him, surprised at his courage. He was the youngest among them, yet his voice carried the belief they all needed to hear. Ryan stepped closer to the tablet and placed his hand gently against the stone. The carvings glowed faintly under his touch, responding as the throne had. His voice was steady. The kings carried the burden of many. They ruled as guardians, not as tyrants. That is the path they left behind. If humanity is to inherit this, we must be more than rulers. We must be protectors. The crew stood together, their lamps glowing faintly in the dim chamber. For the first time since entering the ruins, they felt not just awe but responsibility. The throne was not a prize to be claimed. It was a promise to be fulfilled. As they studied the walls, they noticed more carvings hidden in the spirals. These were not of kings, but of those they ruled. Many species, different in form and size, yet all standing together beneath the banner of unity. The kings had not ruled for themselves alone, they had ruled to hold others together. Myra touched the carvings lightly. This is their true legacy. Not the throne. Not the crowns. It is the bond they forged between worlds. That is what we must protect. Ryan turned to his team, his face lit faintly by the glow of the pillar. Then that is our answer. Humanity is not called to sit on a throne and command. We are called to learn, to protect, and to carry forward what others began. The weight of legacy is not about power. It is about duty. The words settled in the hearts of the crew. Each of them felt the meaning deeply. They were no longer explorers uncovering ruins. They were witnesses to a passing torch. The kings had fallen, but they had not left the galaxy empty. They had left humanity with the chance to rise. For the rest of the night, the crew remained in the chamber, recording the carvings, studying every detail, and speaking quietly about what it all meant. Their debate was no longer about whether the throne belonged to humanity. It was about how humanity should respond to it. Before leaving, Ryan placed both hands on the tablet. The glow spread across the chamber, lighting the carvings in a gentle radiance. It was not bright, but it was steady, like the first light of dawn. He spoke softly, yet every word carried across the chamber. We accept the weight. We will carry it with honor. The glow dimmed again, but the crew felt a new strength within them. As they turned to leave, the carvings seemed almost alive, as though the kings themselves listened from beyond time. The passage ahead was dark, but their steps were sure. The throne had asked a question. The tablet had given a warning. Now humanity had chosen an answer. They would carry the legacy, not as rulers seeking glory, but as guardians seeking unity. The weight was heavy, but it was theirs to bear. The crew stepped out of the chamber of the tablet and entered a passage that sloped gently upward. The air felt different here, lighter, almost as if the very stone recognized the choice they had made. They carried no crown, no treasure, and yet each of them felt they were walking with something greater. They carried the weight of a promise. Hours passed as they climbed the winding path. At last, the tunnel opened into a wide cavern unlike anything they had seen before. It was not carved by tools or machines. It was natural, vast, with sharp crystal spires rising from the floor and ceiling. The crystals glowed faintly, lighting the cavern with a soft, shifting light. In the middle stood a great archway, tall enough for ships to pass through. The crew stopped at its edge. Beyond the arch lay nothing but darkness, a shadow so complete it seemed to swallow the light. Ryan raised his lamp, but its beam could not pierce it. The darkness was not emptiness. It was waiting. Myra spoke first, her voice soft with awe. This is not the end of the ruins. This is the passage forward. Something lies beyond. Terran adjusted the strap of his pack. Then the kings did not only leave their throne behind. They left a doorway. A test, perhaps. Leanne's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Maybe it leads to what they hoped their heirs would build. A place not for kings, but for guardians. Ryan walked closer to the archway, his hand brushing its surface. The stone was cool, but alive with faint energy. He turned back to his team. If the throne was their question, then this must be their answer. Humanity is being asked to step through. The crew gathered, hearts beating faster. They did not know what waited beyond, yet none wanted to turn back. Together, they crossed the arch. For a moment, there was nothing but silence and shadow. Then the darkness dissolved like mist, and they found themselves standing in a place unlike any they had imagined. They were no longer in stone halls or ruins. They were standing in a vast chamber under a sky of stars. The stars were not painted nor distant, they were real, endless, shining above them as though the walls of the ruin had opened into the galaxy itself. Floating islands of stone stretched across the chamber, each glowing faintly with rivers of light that flowed like veins. At the center of it all stood another throne, not of stone, but of light. It was vast, shimmering, and yet it carried no sense of rule or domination. Instead, it radiated peace. Around it floated countless symbols, crowns, banners, and shapes of alien forms. They circled slowly, like the memory of those who had once gathered under the king's rule. The crew stood still, overwhelmed. Their hearts trembled, but not from fear. They understood. This was not a throne to be sat upon. This was the throne of legacy, a creation of the kings that would live on until someone worthy chose to continue their path. Myra whispered, "It is not for one person. It is for all who are willing to protect the bond of many." Taryn nodded slowly. This is what they meant. Power divided them. But unity is what must live on. This throne is not a seat. It is a light. Ryan stepped forward. The throne pulsed faintly, as though aware of his presence. He raised his voice, speaking not just for his team, but for all of humanity. We are not kings. We are not rulers of empires. We are guardians. Humanity accepts the weight of your legacy, not to command, but to protect. We will not repeat your pride. We will build with humility and with strength. The chamber trembled, not with destruction but with life. The rivers of light brightened, rushing faster across the floating islands. The symbols surrounding the throne glowed until they shone like stars. The throne itself released a wave of light that swept across the crew. Each of them felt it within an echo of every vow made by the kings long ago. They felt their unity, their failures, their dreams. They felt the bond of many worlds calling to them, asking to be carried forward. The wave of light faded, leaving the throne shining steadily. But now, a new symbol floated among the crowns and banners. It was the mark of humanity, glowing brightly. The kings had accepted their answer. Humanity was now part of the legacy. Tears welled in Lian's eyes as he stared at the symbol. We are no longer just explorers. We are part of the story of the stars. The crew remained in the chamber for a long time, watching the throne of light and the symbols circling it. They spoke little, for words could not carry the weight of what they felt. At last, they knew it was time to return. The ruins had given them all they needed. As they stepped back through the arch, the stars faded, and the cavern returned. Yet something in them had changed. They no longer walked as strangers in a dead place. They walked as heirs to a living legacy. When they emerged under the open sky of the desert, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight spilled across the horizon, painting the ruins with gold. The world seemed to recognize them, as though the universe itself welcomed their choice. Ryan stood still, watching the light grow. His voice was calm but strong. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The kings are gone, but their promise lives on in us. Humanity will carry it forward. Myra smiled faintly. And one day, others will stand where we stand now. They will ask if we were worthy. Let us make sure the answer is yes. The crew gathered their packs and equipment, their hearts steady. They had not found riches, nor weapons, nor secrets of power. They had found something greater, purpose. As they walked back toward their ship, the ruins behind them glowed faintly, as though the stones themselves remembered the choice that had been made. Humanity had stepped into the legacy of the kings, not as rulers seeking glory, but as guardians seeking unity. The dawn spread across the sky, brighter and brighter. A new day was beginning not just for the crew, but for all of humanity. The eternal resting place of kings was no longer just a tomb of the past. It had become the birthplace of a future. And humanity, with steady steps, had taken its place upon the throne of guardianship.